what is right. Because ultimately what matters to the company is that they have a good working relationship with the agency, because it is the agency that will be defending the permit that would eventually could be challenged in court. And so you want it done right, and you want it to comply with air and water quality standards. And the fact is that it is very important for sides to work together in trying to get it right. Now, we also agreed, and this is a very important point where there's been a lot of misinformation about this issue, is that we agree that there should be an end date to assure that the process does not needlessly drag on. In other words, when the deadlines are met, Senator Schultz in my proposal said the department has to issue a decision. So did the Assembly. Now, the Assembly proposal said that if the department doesn't issue the permit when the deadlines are there, that the state would have to return all of the fees paid by the company. That is one option to assure that there is an absolute drop-dead date. And I think that we could have easily worked out, there was no real intention by us to provide wiggle room for the process to drag on. We want an end date when both sides believe that it is time. For those of you who have taken the time to understand mining projects, it is often that mining companies will ask for regulators to delay the process because they have discovered new information, or they want additional time to be able to work out modifications to the proposal that they submit. In other words, you can't simplify some of these complicated nature just in a few minutes, a poster or a bumper sticker. And we agree on the need to establish a 5-year minimum local impact fee to help local taxpayers. Now, this is an issue that you all should be concerned about. The fact is that in Minnesota, they made a very smart decision 50 years ago to create what is called the IRRB, where the mining company pays a tonnage tax and then distributes that money to local communities and schools, and they invest that dollars in different projects so that the resources that come from mining are allocated not just to help communities who have to invest in their infrastructure and protect their taxpayers, but also diversify the economy when you have deep dips in the taconite industry. Those of you who are familiar with the taconite industry know that just about 8 or 10 years ago, unemployment was extraordinarily high up in the Iron Range because the taconite demand was so soft. And it's very important to make sure that in the good times, the resources that come from some of the resources that profit the company are also shared in a responsible way to make sure that the taxpayers are protected and share in that resource as well. Wisconsin has what is called a net proceeds tax. The net proceeds tax, unlike Minnesota, which is a straight tonnage tax, Minnesota's tax, unlike Minnesota's, which is a straight tonnage tax, Wisconsin is a net proceeds tax, which is their gross proceeds minus their expenses. Now, this is in lieu of property taxes. So the issue is, what is the best way, what kinds of resources will communities, Town of Morris, City of Mellon, Anderson, what kinds, Ashland, Iron County, what kinds of resources can they count on each year to make sure that their taxpayers and their school districts are getting an equivalent value for the ore that is being taken from the earth? In fact, under Wisconsin's law, because of the deductions and depreciation, a company may end up paying nothing until years later when production is finally up and they have exhausted many of their deductions. Now, it seems to me to be a perfectly reasonable expectation for all of you in this room, for those of us in the legislature, to try to make sure we get the best deal for the taxpayers of the state. Just as we want to get certainty for a mining company, you want certainty for taxpayers and the districts, the communities in which the mine operation is located. And we both agreed on the need for a contested case. However, and for those of you who may not be familiar, contested case is a quasi-legal procedure that is used in almost every water permit in the state of Wisconsin, in which citizens can challenge, under oath, can challenge experts and DNR officials before the permit is considered in a way of changing the permit. In other words, modifying the permit. The original attempt was to eliminate the right of citizens to have a voice at all. Eliminate it. Only for mining. So that citizens could use a contested case procedure as they did for the landfill that is located in Serona, Wisconsin, just south of Shell Lake. But no one in northern Wisconsin would be able to use the contested case for this 1,000-foot hole in the ground. That simply is not defensible. If you're going to exempt it for everything, that's one thing. Wouldn't agree with that, but that would be one thing. But to say it's exempt only for this one mining project is simply indefensible, and it is undemocratic. And it is not fair to those who live in this area who may wish to use that basic right, but would be deprived of that right. Now, what Senator Schultz and I did, because the contested case is often viewed as a process that takes too long, what Senator Schultz and I proposed to do was include the contested case within the second 270-day review period. In other words, you can't use the contested case to go on 500 or 600 days to delay a project. It has to be done at the same time that the department is finally reviewing its application. So we responded to the goal of shortening the timeline, making sure it was not abused by anybody, but made sure that it was included, because people have a right to have their voice. Just as those are here with their voice, we respect that. You also need to respect the rights of others who want to exercise it in influencing a permit that they believe is going to impact their quality of life in their area. Now, what the Assembly did eventually is change the reinstated the contested case, but they allowed the contested case after the permit is issued. So they allow a contested case, but the burden responsibility shifts from the company and the DNR to the individual. And that's simply an unfair burden. It should not be the citizen's responsibility to prove something. It should be the company and the DNR as they are defending their project. And remember, this would be a mine law that provides a different right for citizens, a weakened right for citizens to contest than any other water project in the state. It's hard to understand why any citizen who says we the people, who believes that we ought to be a nation of law, would want a law that deprives some citizens of the equal rights that other citizens have. So those became the issues of disagreement. And frankly, those issues, if you just look at the areas, the 12 areas where it dealt with process, I'm convinced that reasonable people could have reached an agreement. I'm just going to take a couple minutes longer. I appreciate the fact that you're allowing me to take some time, but there is a big story to be told that some have not quite understood about the complicated nature of the process. The Assembly bill, after the hearing here in Hurley, you might recall that at the hearing, it's a second hearing in Hurley, very few people testified in favor of the bill. Many people testified in favor of mining, but they were very unhappy with the legislation that was being proposed, and they wanted many changes. Following that hearing, they did make some changes on the Assembly floor. Then, the bill went to the Senate, where in September, the Senate Republican leader, Senator Fitzgerald, had finally agreed to establish a 7-member bipartisan committee on mining. Chaired by Senator Kedzie, I was named a member of that committee. I've been calling for that committee since June of last year, because I really felt it's important to have open discussion on these complicated issues rather than secret discussions that could lead to hardened positions and failure. In February, Senator Kedzie announced his own draft of a bill that was different than the Assembly bill. He was removed. The next action was for the Senate Republican leader to dissolve the committee he created, because he didn't like the recommendations that his Republican colleague was promoting. Senator Jauch and I were members of that committee, and we had been working for 4 months, listening to people, looking for a blueprint that we thought could help offer a responsible counterproduct to enable us to look for a solution between the two houses. Senator Jauch and I introduced our proposal, and there's a summary of it in the back. I don't know if there's enough, but if you want some more, please sign up and we'll be glad to send you material. We offered our proposal, and in offering our proposal, we expressed a willingness to work with others to reach compromise, including conversations with Governor Walker, who called me and called Senator Jauch. And not only did I indicate a willingness, I offered him some suggestions on where compromise could occur.